All right, well, welcome back to FBC Extra. I am here. I'm so excited to be talking to the New Hampshire church plant team. So excited to talk to you guys. How are y'all doing?
Doing good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great.
Phenomenal.
Well, and I know recently you guys got a night on Wednesday night prayer meeting to talk about the church plant where you guys are at. Obviously, it's been so many years in the making. It was cool to get an update from you guys, but I wanted to bring you here to give you a little bit more of an opportunity to share about what's going on. We're so excited. I mean, this is the first major church plant I think Forest has ever had, and it's so cool to see you guys doing it. So where did this come from? I know you guys lived on a dorm together. So did this spawn in a Liberty dorm room like DC Talk back in the day, or?
Yeah, so I think I can start. Maybe Mason and Peter can share their perspective on it. So I grew up in New Hampshire, born and raised. My family was originally from Massachusetts, but then for work purposes, they moved a little farther north. And eventually Liberty came into my path by God's providence. So I came to Liberty in 2018 to study pastoral leadership and biblical studies. Felt a call to work in local church ministry, but I wasn't too sure what that would look like. And when I came to Lynchburg specifically, it was just a culture shock to see how many churches there were. There were Christian bookstores, there were Bible schools, there were Christian schools. People were smiling at me when I passed them on the road. So just things like that really shocked me, and I realized how impoverished my own home was for the gospel. My home. I think in my freshman year, the Lord just really burdened me for going back to my hometown, or not necessarily my hometown, this is my home state. I just felt like it would be such a poor stewardship of my education to not go back to the people that I know and love and know that they need this information. So I just started praying that the Lord would give me friends who would want to go back home with me. And then I quickly met Mason and Peter. I think it was the second semester of our freshman year.
I met Mason and Matthew on the dorm room on the floor, and we became friends really quickly as we got to know each other. A lot of it was just chit chat over homework and taking classes together. We had similar interests, similar conversations. We had similar classes. Mason and I had a lot of classes together. We both were doing biblical studies as our major. So I was not sure what I would end up doing after my degree. I don't think Mason had a clue either. That was where Mason and we grew closer together because we were in CGL group together, community group. Yeah, that was great. That was really great. And we got to know other guys who were like-minded in that group. I sought Mason out to be an accountability partner with me in pursuing Christ. Memory. So
I love that.
Yeah. I think just as we were growing together as guys that were single, we were learning how to better pursue Jesus together. That was where our friendship fostered in those early days in college. And so besides that, just taking classes together, learning more about the Bible, studying it. When you're in the trenches of writing papers at 12 p.m.
all-nighters
at night, right, you really grow close to those people that you find around yourself. And so it wasn't too far into our college career that we realized that we had something special, not only in our friendship, but in our larger group of friends that we knew. And because of that, we just felt like this was something that we wanted to continue for a lifetime, right? Sometimes people have college friends, and then after college, right, they kind of split up, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's understandable. People go off, back home, and, they get jobs and all that. But I think that something we had together was special. I think women often enjoy, but men, maybe it's harder in our society. Maybe there's a stigma to that. It makes it harder to embrace those male friendships. So I think that there was something there that I had been looking for a long time. I remember before college, I had asked God for friends. In college, I asked God again for friends. And I think that I just really needed that. I really needed that community, those friendships. And I not only found that in my friend group, but ultimately, better get, in our church that we soon started going to. Matthew was a big part of that journey too, as he was a shepherd on our hall, and being a shepherd, that put him in crossroads with us. And so I got to know him better as he taught me about coffee, and we did classes together too. And that friendship fostered and grew. And so then the three of us, just got to know each other better through that.
You said something really key, Peter, about like how friends kind of splitting off after college is that's common. That happens. I think when that doesn't happen, it's extremely special. And that's what these two guys in my life, you guys, my best friends, like that is something that is really a gift from God. And this vision for New Hampshire has been 5 years. Yeah. So how that started, which is cool to notice, just acknowledge right now that this is still continuing, and God has been blessing it in so many ways. And so it's just such a blessing to think about this and to reminisce on it. I got saved when I was 14, and then when I was 18 years old, that's when God put mission work on my heart specifically, and I didn't know how that would work, how that would kind of pan out. I was going to go to Liberty as a graphic design major. I just went there because I studied that in high school, and I do art and stuff. So I just, not much thought went into it, but I knew I wanted to do missions somehow. I just didn't know what that would look like. So I get to Liberty, and then my first semester I'm graphic design, and then second semester I switched to biblical studies, which is what Peter was touching on. And that was when me and Peter were on the same hall our freshman year. So I became best friends with Peter first. And then I met Matthew spring semester of our freshman year. I remember the night I met him, he was invited to one of our Bible studies by Peter, and Matthew had this boot on his foot. Broken leg. And I remember he was sitting right next to me, and he was sharing his thoughts in the Bible study, and then I didn't know he would become one of my best friends. It's just really cool to think about that moment and to have that memory. And then after that first year, me and Peter strengthening our friendship, so we became roommates on the hall, which is what he was talking about with Matthew being a shepherd on that
and
hall.
Roommates usually end friendships, so that's pretty cool. You came through that,
right? Oh, it was the best time ever. And so me and Peter are roommates on the hall, and then kind of how like New Hampshire comes into this is one night Matthew came into our room and he was talking to me and Peter before we went to bed. It was one of those late night dorm checks. We were having a great conversation just about ministry and everything that Matthew was sharing, his burden for New Hampshire. And that was the first time I actually thought about doing outreach mission work in the U.S. I had never thought of that before. I was thinking about leaving the country and going somewhere. I had never known how big the drought is, the spiritual drought is in New England. And so when he was sharing that, that's what was striking me at first. And then he said, I remember he started saying, I'm just praying right now for a team of guys to come into my life, for a team of people to come in and go with me, because right now I'm just by myself. And it was after that, it was when me and Peter kind of just looked at each other. We were just like, we don't have any plans, any concrete plans. We don't know what we're doing right now outside of college. So we'll pray about possibly going with you. And then that night we prayed and asked God to open up a summer, not that summer, but the summer after, that we'd be able to go up and spend an entire summer with Matthew and his family there, getting to know the culture, getting to know the people, share Jesus with people. And God answered that prayer. And we were able to go up there for a whole summer.
So, I mean, I'm just a church member here listening to you guys talk. And just an average FBC member, you could think, okay, some guys want to go to New Hampshire church plant. But what I'm hearing from you is that you guys are three best friends, all with the same vision.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yes.
Like, that's a very cool thing.
Yes.
Is there anyone else going with you? Like, I know you guys are kind of the three stooges of the thing, but are there other people that have, like, signed up to go at this point?
Well, Peter and I are married, so our wives are definitely coming.
That's true. That's true.
And
Doubled the fleet. I like that.
And that was a big part of Lauren and I's dating time and then engagement time, because she, the summer that we were, getting to know each other was when I was with Mason and Peter, washing dishes, waiting tables, and praying about going to New Hampshire in the future. So I really wanted to ask just the Lord if this was his will for us, because when I got back, Lauren and I were going to have that conversation, am I going to be going to New Hampshire or not? And do you want to come with me? The Lord really softened her heart to the idea of going to New Hampshire,
which
is amazing. Yeah.
Peter, you got married and then said, we're going to New Hampshire. Is that what happened?
No, it didn't quite work like that. Surprise. Yeah. No, I had a similar situation that Matthew and Lauren had. So Kristen and I, she had it on her heart to do international missions.
Oh, cool.
She had been to Bangladesh, which is, for those who don't know, near India, and there is great need for the gospel there. There truly is. And I think even on my heart, I saw the need ever since being a young person of need overseas. And like Mason, I hadn't considered doing missions in the U.S., right? And I think that's like a very common belief that like America is like this light on a hill. I think that there's some truth to that, but I think as time goes along, that light is quickly fading. I think what a lot of missiologists are saying today is that beacon is actually from the non-Western world now, is beginning to look like that from other countries in the world that are beginning to have many more Christians and much of a more influence on their hemisphere. And so as I began to consider that, I began to realize that, oh, wow, I'm already equipped in so many key ways to minister to people in America that in some ways it would be better for me to stay here to minister to those people if I'm already equipped for those purposes. And so I think that was a shift in my thinking. In addition to that, patience to allow myself to grow as a person as I just graduated and just recently got married, and allowing myself to be patient and allow my church to evaluate, where I'm at. And I think that was a big part of it too. I think in growing in my love of Christ, I realized that love of the church was a big thing, and allowing the church to help you make those decisions in that process is something that I came to realize was really, really important. So,
Well, and you're from Connecticut. That's still New England.
that is New England.
correct?
That's debatable, but no, I'm kidding.
No, it's completely New England.
They're New
yeah.
York Giants fans. That's why it's
Oh,
debatable.
well, that
But,
doesn't count.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I let you wear Patriot stuff.
That's
I wouldn't
right.
have let him
Yep.
wear Giant stuff.
Yep.
Not,
Well,
not in the
amen.
Eagles household.
Yeah.
Well, and so we have Pennsylvania with you,
right.
Mason.
Yeah.
We have you, New Hampshire. You're going home, and you're in Connecticut. So you'll kind of have a north sort of
Yeah.
fingerprint in some capacity.
Yes.
I know Pennsylvania is a little bit different,
None of us
but
have a southern draw.
yeah,
Is
none
that-
of you do,
Which is
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see the need in Connecticut and Pennsylvania at all, like in that kind of way, or is New Hampshire kind of a different animal?
I think it's not as bad as New Hampshire.
Gotcha.
I think there is a big need in Pennsylvania too.
Gotcha. My father-in-law, who passed away in February, he was trying to church plant up in like the sticks of Pennsylvania, and there were towns that didn't have any churches.
Yeah.
So I know there's somewhat of a need out there
Yes.
in the middle where no one really
Yes.
is at.
Yes.
I think you'll find that the two northern corners of the United States, so the Pacific Northwest and then the Northeast, like New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, those states compete for the most unreached part of the states.
Is there a reason for that? That's like that?
Well, there's a lot of snow.
I think being near very large metropolitan cities like New York City and Boston and Portland probably has a big impact on it. But it's just so funny because that's where the Great Awakenings were, right?
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
when we were in New Hampshire that one summer, we went down to Northampton, Massachusetts, which is where Jonathan Edwards Church is. And it was crazy. We didn't see a single nuclear family in that town. And their church had a lot of different flags,
Yeah.
proposing a lot of different worldviews, and you can fill in the blanks there. It was just really sad. There was nothing about Christ. It was just an empty building, quite frankly. That's some sort of historical monument. So
Yep.
I think we see our role as not bringing the gospel to New Hampshire, but bringing the gospel back to New Hampshire, because we recognize that there are people who are already doing that right now. This is not something new that we're doing. We just want to join where God's working.
Yes.
And it seems like He's doing a work there, and we want to join Him in that. Totally. Yeah.
So as far as what you're looking to do, are you looking to get a church building? Are you looking to rent something out? What's the thought on that?
I would say it really depends on what town we go to. We're still praying through that. So we're praying about two different locations. Plymouth, New Hampshire, which is the gateway to the White Mountains. So if you divide the New Hampshire in half, there's Lake Winnipesaukee in the middle, which is the largest lake. North of that is Plymouth. And then there's also Dover, New Hampshire, which is on the seacoast. There's about 18 miles of seacoast on New Hampshire. Very small, but it's a really nice area. A lot more urban-y, a lot more touristy. So we're praying between Dover and Plymouth. Plymouth, they do have a chapel owned by Plymouth State University that we could potentially rent out. As for Dover, we haven't seen many real estate opportunities, so we'll probably have to make those decisions later down the pipeline once we decide a town officially.
And what do you plan on all your roles being up at the church? Like, do you all have specific things you're looking to do at this point?
I feel like a lot of us will probably start, I think all of us will probably start bivocationally.
Yeah, it's a little interesting being on crew staff, which is Campus Crusade for Christ. College ministry, our heartbeat is evangelism and discipleship. And I've been working for them for about 2 years, and I'm full-time now. And I was kind of juggling like what the future there for me specifically. I would be so open to serving the church in an elder role. That is something I'm very open to, but I'm letting the Lord guide that completely. And so it's like completely like just if there's the need, if the need's there and Peter and I can fill it, if that's happening, then let's do it. I think when we get up there, I think it's good for all of us. What Matthew mentioned is that we're all going to be bivocational in that sense, because what we're going to be doing when we get up there first is we're going to be integrating ourselves in the community. But with Crew specifically, for me, there's two options, which I was thinking about more recently, is that Crew has a ton of different ministries. And so there's campus ministry, which is what Crew started as. And then they've branched off into so many different things impacting the kingdom. And there's one specific ministry that is called church movements, which is if you're on staff with Crew church movements, it's basically doing what we do with campus ministry, and we're doing it in local churches that are stagnant and need help, unfortunately, with evangelism and discipleship. And so if I went down that route, it's like killing two birds with one stone. I could work full time in the church plant while also keeping my supporters right now that I have with Crew, which is, a family that I've built by the grace of God, and having them continue to pray and continue to be a part of what God is doing. Or I could stay with campus, which I'm now leaning this direction because it'll provide a great opportunity for our connections with the campuses that are in New Hampshire. So for example, if we go to Dover, we have University of New Hampshire, which is about 15 minutes away. And then if we go to Plymouth State University is in the dead center of the town. Crew just started there, I think, a year ago at Plymouth State.
Oh, cool.
As a campus ministry. And then Crew has been at University of New Hampshire for a while. And so therefore, if I stay with campus, I'll be able to either work at Plymouth That's the plan, Plymouth State University or University of New Hampshire, which would be a great way for our church to have a connection with college students every single year to get them to come to the church. So
yeah, I would say that for me, again, being bivocational, that's going to be something we consider, just because we definitely do believe that God can provide in any way he wants to financially, and he already has begun to provide.
Yeah.
So we are very thankful for that. But at the same time, we do want to be part of the community. We want to have something that puts us in the crosshairs of that community. It allows us to be intentional in our relationships with people, allows us to gain an understanding of how the town works and where people are at. And so I think that's important. Yeah, I would say that for me, in terms of potentially, serving with the church, serving in any capacity, whether it be an elder role, deacon, or just being a part of the church, right? Serving kids ministry, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
I want to participate in any way. So I don't think coming into this demanding any position or any title or anything like that. So I'm content to see God do that work.
Matthew, you're the main pastor looking like, kind of, maybe?
Yeah, I would say I have the desire to be a pastor teacher, as like 1 Timothy 3 says, he who desires to oversee a church desires a noble thing. I think at the end of the day, that's going to be something that our local church here in Forest would confirm. So I think all three of us are really going to submit ourselves to the authority of our current church, which is really a relief. Like, it's not like we're going to go there and plant our own flag and make ourselves the pastors, right? I think there's something really relieving about submitting to our own church. So we're just asking the current elders and deacons and just our whole church family to watch over us. But I do desire to be a pastor teacher one day. So I love preaching and teaching and explaining God's word. So
I think we're going to confirm that for you. I see, Mason, I see you leading the single women's ministry. That seems to be your, I think that's where you'll land.
That's funny.
So you guys have taken a couple trips up there too. Like you've taken some together. And I know there's a lot that's coming out of that trip. So I want you guys to have the floor to talk about all the different things. Because I know, Mason, and we've talked about some crazy cool stories that have come out of that. The trips, what's the linear order of trips?
What was it, the summer of 2021? That was when Mason, Peter, and I went to New Hampshire just for the summer to spend with my family.
Okay, and that's when you worked at the restaurant?
Yes.
Gotcha.
In the summer of 2022, we did a really quick trip to Portsmouth for my bachelor party. We did a church planning scouting trip. That was
Great
very
bachelor
worky.
party.
Yes, that's right. This past summer, 2023, we went to Portsmouth. We lived in Portsmouth for like a long weekend because we were praying about planting there. And that was when a couple from a church in Richmond were considering planting with us as well. They're not going to stay in Richmond, but they're loving on us and they're still supporting us from Richmond. And then this past year with Pastor Joe, we went to like 9 towns and explored.
And where God's people go with God's Spirit, usually good things happen. So talk about these trips, what you guys have seen already up there.
I'm not sure where it falls on the timeline, but I remember before we left, Mason, Peter, and I went to Pastor Tyler at his study at Liberty University and told him about our desire to church plant. Oh, wow. And we were already we just joined the church.
I'm remembering it.
Yeah. And he said, well, guys, like, that's great. You should just go wherever God's working. He didn't say he was going to back us yet, which he shouldn't have, right? He just told us to get involved in the church.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to serve and be faithful where we are.
Sure.
So we said, all right, well, let's see if God's working in New Hampshire. One evidence of God's providence was right before we left for that summer, my childhood friend Sam, one of my best friends since 2nd grade, he ended up giving his life to Christ right before we left. Him and I were doing a virtual Bible study. We were going through the Gospel of John. Got to John chapter 10 on the Good Shepherd, and he said, I want Jesus to be my Good Shepherd.
Oh, man. Wow.
So, like,
so good.
And I've never seen someone go from, darkness to light that closely before.
Right.
But he was a Christian without a church and without discipleship. So right when we got there, he's my neighbor. Like, I live like 5 minutes away from him. Wow. So Mason, Peter, and I got to spend really good quality time with them. By the end of the summer, we got him plugged into a church in Concord, New Hampshire, which is the capital. And he was baptized into that church. So now he knows Christians. He's able to get discipleship. I believe he's living now near the border of Vermont and New Hampshire. So sounds like he's still doing well. I reached out to him fairly recently, and he said he was persevering and he's in a good mood. But that was just so cool that we saw Sam's baptism as God showing us that he's doing something here. And we've become a lot closer with that church that baptized him. So it's River of Grace. And it turns out one of the pastor's sons used to be a member here at Forest Baptist.
Really?
Yeah. So this church, we didn't know what church we wanted to attend while we were in New Hampshire, but we heard about this church on the 9 Marks website. It was like 45 minutes away. So we're like, let's just explore this.
Well, tell a story about how Pastor Tyler connected us to Pastor David.
Right. Right. So Pastor Tyler said, I don't really know many people in New Hampshire, but there's this guy named David Pinkney.
Yep.
His son used to be a member here, and he's really into church planting.
Yeah.
I remember that name.
So
Isn't that
we
wild?
kind of waltzed into this church, and the pastors saw 3 college students with Bibles, and that's pretty rare. So they flocked
stick out like a
towards
sore
us.
thumb. Yeah.
And when Pastor at that time David introduced himself, we're like, wait, David Pinkney, and we made the connection. Like this was the guy.
That's the guy we're looking for.
Yeah. So we're now praying with them about how they could help us as well when we get there. Nothing has been official yet, but they would just be a wonderful church to partner with when we move
But
there.
David, he just took us alongside of himself.
Yes.
And he took us out for coffee a couple times, and he just gave us so much advice and wisdom on what it would be like to live in New Hampshire, like what Concord was like, you know, what church planting there was like. And so he had a lot of good wisdom, and he gave us a lot of connections going in the future. And so they actually were planting right then a church in Henniker.
Yeah.
And so our friend Elliot, who also goes to that church, he's an elder there. He's in the process still of planting in Henniker. And so they're actually involved in what's called the Rural Initiative, which is getting the gospel out into rural places in New Hampshire and across the country. And so that's what David is really good at and does really well. And so, and he's been at that church for what, 40 years now?
40 years. He was born and raised in Concord. He graduated from Liberty and then went back to New Hampshire. So
he's New Hampshire
similar,
grown and you know, born and grown. So you know, he understands the area. So that was a really good place for us to be at.
Yeah,
Initially.
we grew really close with him and Elliot. And Elliot ended up marrying Lauren and I. He officiated our ceremony when we were in New Hampshire. So that was really cool.
Yeah. But the part we need to talk about is the fact that we spent so much time in Bradford and got to work at a local restaurant. We got to know so many of Matthew's bosses growing up and so many of his friends that he knew growing up. That was a really special experience. So Mason, what was your experience like that?
What was so cool about working at the Appleseed, which is that's the restaurant, shout out Appleseed. It's a phenomenal. I miss that Newberry
Great
cut.
Newberry cut.
Yeah, Newberry cut, gravy. All that
What
good
is a
stuff.
Newberry
Oh, man.
cut?
Oh man,
I can
just
taste it right
roast
now.
beef sandwich goodness with gravy on the side, and
Well, I expect you to bring one back.
yeah.
next time.
that would
Yeah.
be that would be fire.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, working there was amazing because we had such natural opportunities to talk about Jesus with like the waiters and the waitresses that worked there. We all had opportunities to talk to people about Jesus, and it was absolutely phenomenal. Like I'm thinking about being in the dish pit. Me and Peter often like traded places in the dish pit, and we would either be working by ourselves or we'd be working with some 15-year-old kid there for a summer job. And we had great conversations with these people that it could change their lives. Like they heard the gospel, they heard about Jesus. And I mean, I'm thinking about my own testimony. I came to know Jesus when I was 14. So it's like when I see these kids in the dish pit, I'm like, you're my age.
Do you remember Gavin? Do you remember Gavin?
Yeah.
He wanted to do
Gabe.
aeronautics. Gabe.
Gabe.
Oh, my
Yes.
bad.
I remember Gabe. Yeah,
Wrong.
absolutely.
Yep.
I forgot.
I remembered wrongly.
Quentin.
Yeah, I remember because we talked to Gabe, and I remember talking to Gabe, and I feel like he was pretty open to the gospel, and he had been to church a couple times, and he was thinking about maybe going to Liberty for aeronautics, and so that was super cool to just kind of get his input. And
Gabe was a worker at the.
Yeah, he was a young
15,
young man.
yeah,
Yeah,
maybe,
probably his first job, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
This is
And
amazing.
That was a
Yeah.
really cool conversation I remember
Yeah.
having. Yep.
Yeah, people in my hometown, they either work at the Appleseed restaurant for their first job or Market Basket, which is like the New England local supermarkets. So you have Kroger and Food Line, well, we have Market Basket. So it's one of those two options.
Sure.
Yeah, you know.
And then a little testimony to like just how beautiful like Christian love and brotherhood is. It was this one time when just it came to my mind. Me and Matthew were having this heart to heart one night. Like we were like cleaning up one of the like outside in the like the different tables and stuff outside in the dining room, and then we were talking about something. And we were just like, we just had our hands like on each other's shoulders, like we were just like having a bro moment. And then one of the people walked out and was like,
The waitresses.
whoa, what is this? You know, it's just interesting. It's like that is normal for me, Peter and Matthew. It's normal for us to express this love for each other. That's something that's not in New Hampshire. It's like it's foreign.
They mistake that for something, for something different.
And it's so sad.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, because they see things very differently, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that the whole LGBTQ issue is a very difficult thing. And what do you do when you're trying to share the gospel in a place where that's so prevalent? You know, I didn't talk to this lady, but I remember some people from our group when we went up there. I think it was with Quinn and Kerrigan at that point.
Yeah, last
but
year.
I remember you all telling a story of this woman who had a daughter or a son that was gay, right? And that was just a moment of like, oh, what do I say, right?
Yeah.
I remember talking to a guy named we were on the streets, Mason, you and I and Kristen. We met these two guys, and we were trying to share the gospel, or just trying to just talking to them and have a conversation. And I remember we mentioned the gospel and mentioned how Christians love other people. That's why we share the gospel. I remember the gentleman said that, well, gay people love everyone too, right? And so that was something that's, again, is just very difficult. And what do you do when people bring that up, especially when it's someone that's so close to them? So I think that's oftentimes why people join or become affirming, is because they know someone, they have a son, they have a daughter, right? And that's just very difficult for them. So I think for us, we affirm, of course, the traditional Christian Judeo worldview, right, and sexual ethic. And so for us, we're clear on that. Well, I guess the question is, how do you go about that? And so I think something that we've learned along the way is, of course, to build those relationships and to really gain trust with people. That's something that's oftentimes lacking up there is trust. And so I think as we go about those conversations, we want to put the gospel on the forefront and be about sharing Christ with people and building that relationship. And then once they know Christ, once they have a better idea of what Christians are like, that they're not hateful people, right? They're actually very loving, that we can then introduce that conversation and have that conversation with them. And so I think oftentimes when the issue is brought up, it becomes something that shuts people down immediately. So immediately when they hear you're a Christian, they immediately go to the issue. That's the first thing they go to. And I think that because it's become so politicized, because it's become something that is so divisive, it's not really helpful to have that conversation right off the bat. It just really isn't, because there's so many things that need to be talked about first, so many words that need to be defined, and trust to be had in the first place. And so
it's really not an underestimate saying that that's the first thing they want to talk to us about. If we mention that we're Christian or that we're with a church, that was very common for any type of evangelism that happened on our first trip in the summer, or when we went to Portsmouth a year ago, or when we explored 9 different towns this past trip in July.
So it's definitely something we continue to learn about, and I don't pretend to have an easy answer, but it's just something that we're going to have to think about more and continue to meditate on and think about what the best way of approaching it is. And so, but I know that we are pretty clear on where we stand on those issues. It's more of a matter of how do we go about sharing that, I think is the key. So
definitely.
Well, Mason, you had a cool story. I remember you mentioned a guy you met on a park bench when you were snapping photos.
Such a God-ordained moment.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what happened was the photo itself is a metaphor.
Oh, is this Tucker?
The photo itself. Yes, Tucker.
Oh, Tucker.
The photo that I took that was in front of the church, if whoever's listening to this, if you remember, whenever Matthew, you spoke there about Portsmouth, right? You spoke about that? Yeah. So the story about Tucker takes place during the Portsmouth trip. Yeah, what happened there is that we were just walking around. We were walking around the city and just, looking around and seeing where we're going to go next. We're all walking down the sidewalk and we round this corner and there's this giant wall, and like behind the wall is like a cemetery above. And so it's kind of hard to explain. You have to see the picture. But we walk around and I just see this guy who's sitting down having just a smoke break, and he's just sitting by this wall and he looks dead. Like spiritually, like he just looks like he's having a bad day. Like I don't know what was going on.
Yes, no light in his eyes.
Yeah, there's no light in his eyes at all. Yeah, he just looked like he was drained, and he had no hope in him, like at all. And so that just impacted me. Dejected. And so it's like this kind of goes into another topic of like kind of like what are some evangelism techniques that we could use in New Hampshire. I think for me specifically, is I like to take pictures. I think what I want to use in the future is just continue using this method because it proved fruitful. It's just like go around with my camera and take street photos because I love doing that, and then also doing street interviews. It opens the door.
People love to be filmed and be on video. That's a great way of talking to people.
Exactly. We're in the social media era where it's like people. It's like the reverse. Usually, it's like you think if you come up with a camera, people will be like, "Oh no, I don't want to talk." It's actually the reverse because we're in such a digital.
Everyone wants a
Instagram
platform.
Reels. Everyone wants to be heard. And it's a camera. Oh, I get to go. Whatever. It makes it more inviting.
Exciting.
So I'm walking around and then I see this guy and he's sitting there, and then so I tell Matthew, Peter, or the group, I say, hey, I'm gonna go back and take some pictures of that guy. So I turn around and I go back and I say, hey bro, you mind if I shoot some photos of you? I'm just doing some street photography. And he was super cool, super kind, and he said yeah, totally. So he just kept smoking a cigarette, and then he just sat there, posed. He was doing great. It was fantastic. I go back, I took a landscape photo and I got a little closer. I took some portraits of him and I told him to look at me and look away and all this stuff, and we're having a small little conversation while we're doing that. And while we're talking, I'm basically asking like are you on a break or whatever? And he said he worked as like a chef at this restaurant somewhere near in town. Yeah, and he was on his break, and then I started asking like, hey, have you been in Portsmouth your whole life? And then he said no. He said I've been here for about 10 years. I'm not from here originally. And then I said, where are you from? He said, I'm from Virginia. I said, oh, interesting. I said, I'm here with a church plant team. We're looking to possibly plant a church here in Portsmouth, maybe. And so that's why we're here actually. And then I said, we're from Virginia too. And then I said, where in Virginia are you from? He like kind of chuckled because he thought I wasn't going to know what he was going to say. And then he said, Lynchburg. I said, bro, we are from Lynchburg, bro.
Yeah.
And then immediately this dude who was dead, he looked dead. Like he had, no expression on his face. He just got this huge smile on his face.
Wow.
And he stood up and he just like hugged me.
Bear hug. Yeah.
It was like this guy is just like my home. It's kind of like my home just came here. And that immediately opened him up. And then Matthew came over, and then we started sharing just a little bit more about what we were doing. We had an opportunity to share a little bit about Jesus with him, share some
About divine
tracks.
appointment, right?
Yes,
I'm praying
absolutely.
for that, and God provides.
Just
100%.
Both being from Lynchburg
Yeah.
was enough.
Yes,
That's crazy.
insane.
Yeah.
And then he followed me on Instagram, and then
Yeah.
I posted some pictures that day of his portraits online, and then he commented on it, and he said that we met him in a very dark place. The photo is metaphorical because he's sitting in the darkness, like by this wall, and behind the wall is a cemetery, and so it's like he's literally in the
good.
ground, like in
Yeah.
front of this wall,
Wow.
and he needs Christ. So pray for
Yeah.
Tucker if you're
Wow.
listening to this. Take a moment to pause the podcast and pray for Tucker if you please. May do that. Thank
Have you had follow up with him?
Unfortunately, no. I reached out to him on some DMs and he hasn't responded to me, and so that is very unfortunate. But the seed is planted, and we
Yeah.
continue praying
No,
for
for
him.
sure, yeah.
Another
I
witness
think we
to come
left
into
him
his
with
life.
like a gospel track,
Yeah.
something to
Yeah.
read
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah.
So.
And that seed is what we're looking for, because we, on the same trip, I think we went to was it a Chinese shop?
Yeah.
And we got lunch there, and we had a encounter with our waiter, and that was a very special encounter, because we got to talking to her, and we were just trying to start some conversation, and one of our members asked her, hey, is there any way we can be praying for you? She, through broken English, she misunderstood what we were saying.
Yeah.
And so then kind of a little tear started falling from her eye.
She didn't know what really prayer was, what that
And so
meant.
she went to go to our manager, and she thought that perhaps we were concerned with the fact that she was wearing a mask, and that perhaps that was because she was sick. So she had this whole understanding that like maybe she had offended us, and then that was for her. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know what exactly was going on, but anyways, the manager came out, but we just communicated that, hey, no, we're not concerned about the mask. We're just here asking if you want any prayer. So, but it got to a certain point where she was so touched by that, and she said something remarkable. She said, wow, are you all Christians? Because I know that Christians are they do nice things.
Yeah.
They
They
love
help
people. They
right?
help people.
Yeah.
Again, talking about that seed is just so important. Leaving that impression, I think, is so important, because for some of the people in New Hampshire, they may have heard the name Jesus before, but they've never met a Jesus follower before. And that's the key difference.
Great point.
And so Jesus, for a lot of people, is a person of history, right? And to actually meet a Christian, right? And to actually hear the gospel, for many people, that's something they've never encountered. And so the first impression, I think, matters a lot, that Christians love people. They help people. And I think she'll go away with that encounter thinking well of Christians. And so, hey, maybe the next encounter she has with a Christian, maybe that'll make her heart receptive to hearing the gospel.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I feel like evangelism down in the Bible Belt is more about connecting dots. They have some familiarity with the idea that there's one God, and there's this man named Jesus, and that doing good things might not get them into heaven, but they don't really know how to get to heaven. And our job as evangelists is normally to connect the dots.
Yeah.
But up in the Northeast, and again, it exists down here as well, but I just think right now it's more secularized. You have to draw the dots first before you can connect them.
they don't even have the dots.
They don't have dots at all. They're not assuming that there's a God that's personal, or that he alone exists,
Right.
or that Jesus is God and man. So there's just a lot of foundation building that you have to start with.
Yeah.
They're not going to have those concepts already in mind.
Yeah, and it's a diverse spiritual landscape too. Yeah, we came to found pretty quickly that it wasn't so much atheism that we were going to meet in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
But it was a very diverse spirituality of a lot of different spiritual beliefs. So
Yeah.
just a general spirituality that, hey, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
Yep.
And so that
That's
was
the common
really
answer.
that was very interesting to learn about. And so that's something that we're gonna have to consider and think about more, just as we prepare for that and build those relationships. So
Definitely.
Obviously, we're going to be praying for you guys going forward. And, I think that's probably a big part of what you guys are asking for the church. But is there anything else you guys need from us, the members of Forest, both before you go and after you go? Is there another need? Obviously prayer, a big one, but is there any other kind of support you guys are looking for?
We keep saying this over and over again, but churches plant churches. We're convinced of that. So this is not something that our team is doing in isolation from Forest. And the way that we plant churches is there are people who send us and there are people who go with us. I think that's the only two types, right? You're either sending us out or you're coming with us. The Lord puts it on your heart to go with us as a missionary to New Hampshire. Really consider that. Lauren and I have met a few people who have said they're praying about that. And that's just incredible to think that they would be willing to make that sacrifice for the sake of the gospel, to uproot from their family, their comfort zone, their job, and relocate to a very cold area for the sake of making Christ known where he's not currently named right now. So,
man, I just realized we're going to lose all three of you at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
Wow. So if someone is considering going, what would you tell them? Like, what do you tell people that are like, hey, I'm praying through it, like I'm interested in the concept? Like, what do you tell them?
Well, buy some warm clothing.
So, buy some more clothing.
Buy a shovel.
That's right. Buy a shovel. Get 4-wheel drive. In the summer before our trip, we were hosting regular prayer meetings once a month, normally on a Saturday. So I like to invite them to that because we want them to be praying through that with us, not away from us, but with us. So once we start getting those scheduled again, we're trying to get our feet back underneath us after the trip.
Sure.
We'll probably try to schedule a few more maybe this fall and then especially in the spring. But we'd probably invite them to come to that first just to get to know us, because if they're going to join us in a church plant, we should become really good friends with them.
Yes, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have that bond. Like, you guys have that. You're building on that. It makes total sense.
And also, practically speaking, look for employment, right? Like if you're a current teacher at Liberty University, well, there's Plymouth State University, which might be where we're going, or University of New Hampshire. So pull up Zillow or Indeed, start looking at real estate. Like that's just practical stuff that all three of us are going to have to do with our families.
Also, I think there should be a willingness to go. We're not necessarily asking people to grit their teeth and come up with us. We definitely want people that really earnestly desire the same thing. And so I think that that's something that would be conducive to what's coming. So
definitely.
Yep.
Do you have a time frame of when you're tentatively looking to go up there?
So my wife Lauren and I, we will be taking the church planning assessment with the North American Mission Board. Big mouthful, right? So we'll be representing the team. So, Lauren and I together, they want both the husband and wife to assess our marriage, how we're doing financially. If we're being good stewards of our resources, but we're also going to represent the team as a whole. And that'll be in November. We'll be going to Boston for that.
Okay.
And the North American Mission Board will give us a green light, a yellow light, or a red. So they really just want to assess the team's calling, their vision. Each light is a blessing, right?
Yeah.
If God doesn't want us to go, I think he'll work through our denomination in the cooperative effort to show us that.
Yeah.
And a yellow light's also a blessing because the yellow light just means they're going to give us some key areas to work on. If they see a blind spot that we're not aware of, they're going to identify that and say, hey, if you work on these 3 things, then you'll get a green light.
Yeah, that's
But if they give us a green light, then they pledge to give us financial support, which is all gone from the Annie Armstrong Fund for 5 years. I think it can continue after, depending on how you're doing. But they also get us connected with counseling, coaching, I think insurance for the pastor. It's incredible.
Yeah.
If that goes well, I think we would like to move in the summer of 2026. I'd like to finish seminary. I'd like to have all that done, all my training done. Yeah. And then have a year after that. I'm hoping to graduate this spring. Have a year after that with Lauren to look at real estate and relocating. I know Peter and Kristen will have to do that as well, and Mason as well. Cost of living up there is a lot more expensive.
It's, something that people should know probably before coming to New Hampshire is that it's going to be more like a slow cooker than a microwave.
Yes. Yes.
I think that that's something to consider. It's not going to be easy. It's going to take patience. It's going to take the long haul. And so I think that's also something to consider if you are interested, just to know that. But at the same time, even if you did come for just a time, that is still meaningful. Either way, we're grateful for the support. We just covet your prayers, and we thank you for your partnership with us. Thank you for everyone that has been so kind, for just having us over for a meal with their family, to praying for us, for taking us aside in church, and just encouraging us in any way. And so I know we definitely need that encouragement. We definitely need that camaraderie. And we still want to be giving reports in the future. We still want to come back down and
be amazing.
And share what
it's
it's
so
like.
Cool to think about. I'm gonna add something to what you said, Peter. I think it's really, really, really important what you said about it being a slow cooker and not a microwave. I remember Pastor Chris, right, in Portsmouth, right? I remember he said something to us that was very eye-opening, and I think this is for anyone who's considering going. He was very blatant with us, and he said that if you guys are planning on moving to New Hampshire, you need to pack all of your things in your caskets and move up. And basically why he said that is because you need to show these people that you're here not just to like see if something kicks off or something works, but you're here to love these people and to continue loving them. And when they see that you're genuine and that your love is genuine for them, that's when they start to open up. I think he said 7 years or something before he had a conversation. Like he's praying for his neighbors. He finally had an opportunity to share Jesus with this guy, and he built up this amazing relationship with him, and he was able to have that opportunity. So it's just like,
that seems to be backed by like statistics as well. Like takes 7 years to like build a trusted relationship where they're finally like authentic and open.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this isn't going to be like, hey, we're up there 3 years, and if nothing happens, we're out. It's like, if they know that's our heart, why would you get close to someone if you know you're just here for see if something works? But if we're there instead to love as Jesus calls us to love, then we're going to see the Holy Spirit work. And so that's something to consider if you're thinking about coming out. It's a cross to bear. So
just to piggyback on that, I remember reading about D.A. Carson. He's faithful evangelical scholar out in Trinity Seminary.
Evangelical?
And evangelical, that's right. And his dad was a church planter in Canada, which is probably even harder than, it's slower, colder. And apparently when he grew up with his dad as a church planter, there were a series of missionaries from Africa that were just used to very quick church growth. And they came to Canada to help him out because I think they were driven out of their country. And after like 6 months, they all left. And as a little boy, D.A. Carson asked his dad, like, why did they leave? He says, oh, because they didn't see growth. And D.A. Carson, as a curious boy, said, Dad, why don't you leave? And he reported how he said, with tears in his eyes, he said, God has people here. And I'm staying until I can find all those people.
Yeah.
And that just so encouraged me. It's like, I think it's going to be like that. Like the slow cooker, like you said.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, guys, it was such a blast talking to you guys. This was fun. We should do this again. And, honestly, you guys talked a lot about your calling, wanting the church to come alongside you and really verify your calling. And I can only speak for myself, but I feel very confident in sending you guys to New Hampshire. You guys are all super godly young men who love the Lord. You are evangelists. You're all called. I see this spiritual gift of evangelism you all possess. And for Matthew, I see your calling to pastoral leadership. You guys are exactly the kind of people that I would be proud to send out to do a church plant. And I'm sure the church feels the same way. We're happy to verify and confirm that calling for you guys. It's been so fun talking to you guys about this. We will definitely get you guys on again, both before you leave, but also after you guys leave. Come back, let us know how you're doing. Let us know how we can support you. Super grateful, super excited to see what the Lord does. This is exciting. This is so exciting. The first real church plant that we've sent out as a church. I know the church is excited, but I'm also excited. So guys, let us know what you need. We'll be praying for you. We're so excited for what God's going to do in your lives. God bless you guys. Take care of yourselves, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.